Hey friends, I hope everyone is doing great this fine Monday. It's another beautiful week filled with many movies to watch. And for today's episode, I'm delivering another solo roundup for you all. This time, we're going to be chatting about some of my favorite road trip films. And I'm such a fan of road movies. Oh my goodness. They are just so perfect for sparking that wanderlust within you. They're usually exciting, or on the flip side, they can be relaxing. But whatever the case, they really do just push that sort of restless curiosity within me. And I think that road movies are also a great tool because they usually serve as quite literally a journey, sure, but it's more than that. They're usually filled with a sort of mental journey or transformation for our leads, kind of like an opportunity for growth or shining a light on new perspectives through travel, you know? So I'm not going to yap about this too much, but I think we should just dive in. So here are some 10 selects that I came up with, and I hope that at least a few are new to you and you're curious to check them out. First one on this list is going to be a very fun entry. It's a movie that's an absolute delight and never fails to make me laugh, and that's Aki Kaurismäki's 1989 film, Leningrad Cowboys Go America. Oh my gosh, I love this one. I have been on such a Aki Kaurismäki kick this year, especially after catching Fallen Leaves at the Vancouver International Film Festival last year. It was the first movie of his that I saw, and I was just immediately attracted to this story of the underdog. It's a through line in his work. He even did something called the Proletariat Trilogy, or I guess it's not really a trilogy anymore since he added Fallen Leaves to it as the fourth entry, but anyway, I just love his stories and his ability to deliver them all with such fantastic deadpan comedic timing. And Leningrad Cowboys Go America is another fine example of just that. So, with this movie, the Leningrad Cowboys are a band. They were originally conceived as a fictional band by Kaurismäki himself. It was like a joke project, and they started appearing in some music videos that Kaurismäki directed, and then suddenly he decided to make a feature film starring them, which is this one in 1989, and from there it spawned a sequel. And now they are a real life rockabilly cover band. So, I mean, it's just sublime. As for the movie itself, The Leningrad Cowboys Go America is, of course, a road movie. It opens in Siberia, where we discover that they're failing to find an audience because they lack commercial potential. And so basically, the solution is to go to America because people will, quote, buy anything there. And that just had me giggling when that was announced. But yeah, so off they go to America with their incredibly selfish manager, mind you, and they stand out like a sore thumb. They have these exaggerated pompadours, these full length fur coats, these very pointy leather shoes, sunglasses, and they just have these blank expressions. It's hilarious. And they get to New York first. Clearly, their audience isn't there. They're dubbed, I think, the worst rock band in the world. And they just run into bad luck constantly. That said, a booking agent tells them that they may have a gig for them in Mexico at a wedding. So off they go on this journey down south in a 1975 Cadillac, which, by the way, they pin back their shoes so they can fit into the car and actually reach the gas pedal. Plus, they do some other stuff that I won't spoil, but it's great. And so off they go, hitting up Memphis, New Orleans, and so on. And it's wonderful. And you really want them to succeed, truly. And their style evolves as they go, their musical style, I should say. They stay the same, visually speaking. But it's all great to see. And there are constant gags throughout. There's a cameo by Jim Jarmusch, which I loved. He and Kaurismäki are actually friends in real life, and it kind of makes sense since they both have that similar deadpan sense of humor. I'll do a proper episode on Kaurismäki's movies because I love, love, love them so much, but that is my first pick. Next up is a film that I talk about so often, but I couldn't do this episode without including it. And it's one of my all-time favorite road trip movies. I'd certainly be lying to myself if I didn't include it today. And that's Alfonso Cuarón's iconic 2001 movie, Y tu mamá también. I know, you guys are probably like, of course you picked this one. Whatever, I did. And the last time I spoke about it was on my coming of age episode with George. And of course, then I looked at it through a different angle. But for today, I'm highlighting it as a road movie. And so you all know from that episode, the movie revolves around two 17-year-old boys in Mexico City in the late 90s. And over the course of their summer break, they decide to go on this cross country road trip after they meet the older Luisa at a wedding. And blah, blah, I won't get into it too much, but all three of them decide to adventure together to reach this gorgeous, secluded beach. And from there, it becomes a layered journey for them. It's not just about sexuality and their friendship. They also get to experience their own country so much. And Emmanuel Lubezki's cinematography really drifts away from the main plot to show us the people that live in Mexico. We truly get to see the country with these two boys. And according to Carlos Cuarón, Alfonso's brother, who co-wrote the script with him, the movie was inspired by the trips that they took when they were teenagers, albeit not with a gorgeous Spanish woman, but still. And the brothers had already spoken about this idea to do a low-budget film that revolves around a road trip to a beach. And it meant a lot to them, going back to their roots to do this. And they added some elements to the story from their lives growing up. Like the nanny in the film is played by their real life nanny that they had growing up. And one of the destinations the trio hits up is actually their nanny's hometown in real life. The wedding that the boys go to is in the same place where Carlos and Alfonso went to a wedding. The car that they drive is the one that the brothers had growing up, and so on and so forth. So, yeah, it's a movie with a connection to the Cuarón brothers, and its strength lies within how authentic it is. And you really get to see an authentic portrait of Mexico in the late 90s. So that's my second pick for today. Alrighty, number 3 is a road movie classic. This is another one that leaves me with a smile on my face always, and that's Peter Bogdanovich's 1973 gem, Paper Moon. This is a movie I watched when I was younger. I believe I was in high school, and it's just stuck with me ever since. When I watched it as an adult earlier this year or last, I can't remember, I loved it even more. And I was truly blown away by the performances of our two leads, played by Bryan and Tatum O'Neal, who are a real life father daughter duo. But yes, what is this one about, you may ask? Paper Moon is adapted from a 1971 novel, Addie Pray, by Joe David Brown. And the story takes us to 1930s Kansas during the Great Depression. We meet Moses, or Mose, Pray. He's a con man. And one day he meets Addie Loggins at her mother's funeral. Addie is 9, she has nowhere to go, and Mose shows up, and because he knew her mother once, I'm not going to say more, suddenly he's tasked with having to take Addie on this road trip to her aunt's home in St. Joseph, Missouri. So off they go, and along the way, they essentially con and swindle their way through farm country. And of course, their relationship grows as well. It's just a joy to watch these two, really. And of course, Tatum O'Neal is a standout in her first film role. Her ability to convey such a range of emotion with snappy, perfectly timed dialogue is incredibly impressive. She actually won a very well deserved Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress. And she is still, I believe, to this day, the youngest competitor. But besides the performances, you also get Laszlo Kovacs's cinematography, which is a treat. The film is shot in black and white. The movie's depth of field makes everything really crisp and in focus, allowing you to pay attention to everything in the frame. And the attention to detail is incredible. It's also bolstered by Polly Plath's immaculate production design. She was Bogdanovich's ex-wife at the time. But there are just so many period specific things here, from the Ford that Mose drives to the bottle of soda that Addie drinks, which is, what was it called? Nehi soda, which was founded as Chero Cola in 1910. And then in 1925, it was renamed only to become Dr. Pepper, and so on and so forth. But it's a film that really does take these things and makes it feel authentic to the time period. So yeah, Paper Moon, great road trip movie. Just one that's gonna leave you with a smile on your face. Next up is another road movie classic. I'm gonna go with Wim Wenders' Paris, Texas from 1984. Of course, we recently had our Wenders episode with Tyler a few weeks ago, where we covered Paris, Texas. So I won't get into the nitty gritty, but I mean, how would I make a road movie list and not include Paris, Texas? And what can I say about Paris, Texas that hasn't been said before? Let me try my best. The movie introduces us to Travis, played by the phenomenal Harry Dean Stanton, and we first see him wandering the desert in Texas. He's clearly not doing great, and he finally collapses outside of a small town. He's taken in by a very seedy doctor, mind you. And so here we discover that Travis is mute for some reason. His brother Walt comes to get him from Burbank, and soon enough, we discover that Walt and his wife, Anne, have taken in Travis's son, Hunter, who is 7. And Travis has just disappeared for the past 4 years. So we watch as he and Walt make their way back to California. Travis slowly becomes able to speak again. And we discover more about his life and his goal, which is to track down Hunter's mother, Jane. We discover that she's in Houston. So off Travis ends up going again. But this time he takes Hunter with him. And if you want to know more, watch my Vim Vendors episode, of course. So yeah, I love this movie. Vendors as well is just so well known for his road films. This one notably shares some similarities with his other movie, 1974's Alice in the Cities, which I also recommend you check out, which is also very similar to Paper Moon. So you can look up those similarities as well. But anyway, Vendors is just a fan of landscapes and roads in general. His first production company was called Road Movies, and so many of his films contain characters just drifting on a road to somewhere. Some of them are good people, some of them are bad people, but it's always about this journey. And Paris, Texas is no different. Benders also cleverly plays around with this idea of separating emotional connections between his characters. And so he does this by creating distance to emphasize the character's fragility and loneliness. He notably does this with Travis and Jane in the film's final act, which, by the way, some stunning shots exist in that last chunk of the film. But he also does this with Hunter and Travis too, emphasizing language and words versus physical touch. Paris, Texas is beloved for a reason, so if you haven't seen it, I very much so suggest it. Alrighty, next up is a movie that isn't as well known as what I've brought up so far. I guess, save for Kaurismäki's movie, that was a bit more of a deep cut. But holy shit, I adore this next pick so much. I actually have a poster of it here. Let me see if I can find it for you, that I picked up at the National Museum of Cinema in Turin, Italy. So for those of you who are on video, you can take a look at that. But the film in question is 1962's Il Sorpasso by Dino Risi. And this is just a classic of Italian comedies. It was translated in English to The Easy Life, probably to capitalize on the success of La Dolce Vita, which came out 2 years prior. But Il Sorpasso means the overtaking, which is, the act of overtaking someone on a highway. And let me tell you, if you've driven down a highway in Italy, you know that that is a high stress situation. I still have just anxiety inducing memories of driving through Italy in 2019. But yes, so the movie, let's get into it. The movie stars the legendary Italian actor Vittorio Gassman as Bruno. I would place him in his late 30s, maybe early 40s, and Jean-Louis Trintignant, who is kind of poorly dubbed, by the way, but he plays a young law student, Roberto. You may remember him from one of my previous episodes on Eric Romer. He notably starred in My Night at Maud's. And he's less offensive in this film, but still kind of shy and not really outgoing. Where Bruno, on the other hand, is a loud-mouthed, infectiously entertaining, yet selfish and brash guy. I don't even know if he has a job, to be honest, but there's something about him that's so endearing. Anyway, we see him zipping around an empty room one day during a national holiday, and he needs a phone, but everywhere is closed. So he sees Roberto peeking through an open window, and Roberto invites him up to use his phone. And next thing you know, Bruno convinces him to spend the day with him, hang out, go grab a drink, grab lunch, and bail on his law school studies. And it works. So off they go, stopping from town to town, and things just snowball. I don't want to say more. It's much better than I'm making it sound, I promise you. But what's so great about this movie is how it captures Italy in the 60s. An Italy that I don't know if we'll ever see. Even at the start, seeing Rome that empty is crazy. It's shot in widescreen, so you really soak up all these images as they travel along, the people they meet. You just see this authentic portrayal of Italy, warts and all. And it's nothing like the luxurious La Dolce Vita, for example. The movie serves I guess, although it's genuinely a laugh out loud comedy, it also serves as a cautionary tale of that good life that our characters seem to wrap themselves up in, a life of no worries. And sure, some of the film's jokes haven't aged well, but others still work today. And it's such a refreshing comedy. This is all done through Bruno's character and his crazy stances on so many things. There's even a joke at one point at Antonioni's expense and his movies, calling them boring. It's hilarious. This one is playing on the Criterion channel and it's such a sleeper, so definitely give it a whirl. What are we at now? Number six? I think so. So for this one, I'm going to go with a film that I've been championing online so much this year. It's a film that I watched for the first time this year as well, but I've since seen it multiple times. It's so comforting to me. And although the distance traveled isn't that far in this one, it still counts as a road movie, God damn it, and that is Greg Matola's The Day Trippers from 1997. This is one of those movies that, premise wise, is just impossible to become a story today if it was set in present day. It's just such a relic of its time and it's hilarious. That's partly due to Matola's clever script, but also the ensemble cast, which is fantastic. You have Hope Davis, Stanley Tucci, Anne Mira, Parker Posey, Liev Schreiber. They're all great, particularly the relationship between Mira's character and Schreiber's. But the story, I'm getting ahead of myself here. Hope Davis's character, Eliza D'Amico, is married to Tucci's character, Lewis. And she thinks that everything is great until one day she's cleaning their apartment and finds what appears to be a love letter written to her husband, which leads her to think that he's cheating on her. So she heads to her parents' place, and there live her parents, obviously, but also her sister Jo, played by Posey, and her sister's boyfriend Carl, played by Schreiber. And they're showing, or she's showing them all the letter, and they all decide to pile into the parents' station wagon and head from Long Island to Manhattan. And it's hilarious. Jo is this too cool girl that at the film start, she's bigging up her boyfriend. And Carl is so pretentious. He's writing this book that I'm not even going to get into the premise. He explains it in the movie, but throughout the car ride, he keeps trying to explain the plot, and it's only Anne Mira's character that's paying attention. It's fantastic. Jo later starts to slowly resent her boyfriend, and their dynamic changes. Honestly, everybody's dynamics change. They meet different folks along the way throughout their journey. It's just a great example of what an indie comedy can do with a tight script and a great cast, because honestly, a lot of this takes place in the car, really. And along with keeping you on your toes with its rapid fire humor, The Day Trippers is also incredibly comforting. As I mentioned at the start, the reason why I love road movies is because they usually serve as tools for a character's journey of self discovery. And this whole family of the Malones, they're all on this journey together, learning about their relationships as a whole as well. If you're a fan of Noah Baumbach's or Jim Jarmusch's comedic style, I have a strong feeling you'll enjoy this one. But also, if you like Matola's work, I would check this out because years later, he would release Superbad, and Superbad is fantastic. So, yeah, check out his early work because the gags are still there and they are aplenty in this film. Alrighty. Next up, we're going to go for something a lot darker as my seventh pick. It still qualifies as a comedy of sorts, and that is Greg Araki's The Doom Generation from 1995. This is actually the second installment in his Teenage Apocalypse trilogy after Totally Fucked Up from 1993, followed by Nowhere from 1997. So this is the middle one. Personally, for me, this is my favorite. It's kind of a toss up between this and Nowhere, but you watch them all and you let me know what you think. The Doom Generation is chaotic, it is weird, it is peak 90s teen nihilism. The cast is incredible. The set design is just out of this world. And the soundtrack, oh my God. I think I actually included this on my soundtrack episode. You have Slow Dive, Nine Inch Nails, Jesus and Mary Chain, and so on. Rocky's just known for his killer soundtracks. He used to be a music journalist as well. But anyway, the Doom Generation takes place in this post apocalyptic world. It's just this wasteland of America. And so we meet Amy Blue and her boyfriend Jordan White as they're aimlessly drifting and driving. And one day they come across a drifter himself, Xavier Red, who, after an incident, let's call it, gets stuck traveling with them. And this just becomes a super bizarre and very violent road trip of them on the run. The film was shot in underdeveloped urban areas to give it that apocalyptic feel. And on top of that, the set design here is fantastic, particularly the convenience stores and hotel rooms that they go to. You just got to see it to know what I mean. It is otherworldly. Jim Feely's cinematography is stunning as well. Everything is exaggerated in this movie, and it is cocky, it is smug, and it knows it. Not to mention the dialogue, which is razor sharp, very sarcastic and mean. This is just a representation of this generation at the time that just did not care. Like I said, peak 90s teen nihilism. But at the same time, Araki uses this to tackle very heavy subject matter. And I won't get into that today. Perhaps there's an episode on his movies coming up, wink wink. So I'll stop there. But I do have a lot more to add, and I will in the near future. For now, if you want to watch a dark and twisted road trip movie, that probably won't give you the same amount of wanderlust as some other options on this list, then the Doom Generation is for you. All right, so for my next one, this also doubles as a tense thriller. I'm going to go with Henri-Georges Clouzot's The Wages of Fear from 1953. And I know, in one of my previous solo episodes, the one on anxiety-inducing movies, I picked William Friedkin's Sorcerer over The Wages of Fear. They're both based on the same book. But at the time, I picked it strictly due to that bridge scene in Sorcerer, which knocked out like a few years off of my life due to how stressed out I was. But for today's chat on road movies, I'm going to pick what I believe is the better of the two films, although technically they're not all roads because they're traversing through the jungle. They're roads. They're roads. Anyway, as I mentioned, The Wages of Fear. The film is adapted from a 1950 French novel by Georges Arnaud. It takes us deep into the heart of the South American jungle, where we meet four European men who aren't doing so well cash-wise. And so they're hired by an American oil company to drive two trucks containing nitroglycerin through these perilous jungle roads to extinguish an oil well fire. Of course, as I said when I described Sorcerer in the previous episode, the nitroglycerin is very, very, very unstable. So any large bump in the road or anything like that could mean explosion and death. So yes, very stressful. The journey part of this movie begins at the hour mark, and then you get about an hour and a half of just tension. And I find that the character building is a lot stronger in this film than in Sorcerer. You get to know these men better. And Clouzot saw the film to be about courage and how these men perform under pressure, how they act towards one another, etc. And even though the movie sees four men initially, there are two leads. And what this movie does so cleverly, I think, is it places the two leads in one truck. Whereas in Sorcerer, the two leads are split apart in two different trucks. So the dialogue in The Wages of Fear is a lot stronger. There are some situations that really do stick with you. Just overall a classic and masterclass in the thriller genre, in my opinion. Actually, interestingly enough, this movie was an influence on Christopher Nolan's Dunkirk. And Nolan screened this movie for his cast and crew because he wanted to show them how to craft such brilliant suspense. Not to mention all the scenes with the truck and what happens when things don't go according to plan. That's all I'm saying. Just watch it. It is great. We're at my ninth pick. This one, honestly, I was doing some thinking and this movie came to me and I was like, oh my gosh, this definitely counts as a road movie. And that's Ingmar Bergman's Wild Strawberries from 1957. I know. I was just as shocked as you all are to come to the realization that Bergman essentially did do a road movie. And he did. And it's very slow and reflective, of course, but it counts. The movie's main character is Isaac Borg. He's a retired and kind of grouchy doctor, and he's traveling from Stockholm to receive an honorary degree from his alma mater. And along the way, he's traveling with his daughter-in-law, who's pregnant, Marianne. Marianne does not like her father-in-law much. She's actually wanting to separate from his son, but they travel together and get to know one another. And they warm up to one another, meet people along the way, but most importantly, it's a trip that really forces our lead to reflect on his life, his successes, his failures. It really is that idea that I just keep drilling on in our heads, that a road movie forces a lead character to really think inwardly about themselves. And Wild Strawberries is a perfect example of that. It's also filled with dream sequences. It's just, I mean, it's Bergman. I love his movies. And I've said it in the first episode of the pod on Bergman, but I'll repeat it again because it's worthwhile and fascinating, in my opinion. But even though Wild Strawberries and The Seventh Seal are very different when it comes to their premises, they still both feature leads that have gone far away from home, are reflecting on their lives thus far, and making their final journeys back, filled with these existential ponderings. So I always love thinking of these two films in that way. And what I really love about this film, Wild Strawberries, is that it gives an older character a chance to shine. I always think that it's great to see a character in their old age. Isaac here is, I believe, in his late 70s, and to really take a trip down memory lane and to see things from their perspective. And Isaac really learns a lot about himself during this trip, proving that you can still change in your old age as well. It's a very well respected movie for a reason. And in my opinion, it's one of Bergman's best, although, I mean, I love so many of them. And wow, we've reached it to the end. This one is also more somber in tone, not at all fun like some of the other entries on this list, but it deserves to be here, and that's Agnes Varda's Vagabond from 1985. This one is a pretty heartbreaking movie. It opens with the death of our lead character, a vagabond, Mona, and she's frozen in a ditch in the French countryside. From there, Varda takes us back in time, and we see the few weeks leading up to her untimely demise, where we learn about her, albeit not too much. But we see how she travels and hitchhikes, the impact she makes on the people she comes across, and ultimately, we see her biggest desire in life, and that is to be free. Varda, of course, had a lot of experience as a documentarian as well, and she really incorporates a sense of realism to this film. It's a film that, right off the bat, from the way it opens, is so void of that romanticism that comes with road movies. You just know immediately that it'll be void of that. So it's a bit of a different approach to some of the other entries on this list. And Varda really wanted to give a realistic approach to what she was actually seeing at the time. According to her, as she was researching this film, she saw an increase in women becoming displaced and appearing on the road as, again, these vagabonds. And so she wanted to explore their stories and see why they essentially chose freedom over comfort. And I think that's due to her background as a documentarian, due also to the fact that she was a female filmmaker speaking to this female centric experience. It's just a perfect pairing. And this went on to become one of her most successful films, premiering at the 42nd Venice International Film Festival, where it also won the Golden Lion. So that's it, my friends. 10 road trip movies for you to check out. As we saw, some of these are lighthearted and fun. Some of these may require some cinematic TLC afterwards, but I stand behind all of these. And I think that they're all great films. I urge you to check them out. So let me know what you think, and I'll be speaking to all of you again next week. So thanks for hanging out, and I will see you next time. Bye.